Good morning, everyone. Thanks for your patience. This is John Haller with our Israel update. I'm very pleased to have with us today retired Colonel Miri, who is with the International Institute on Counterterrorism at Reichman University. Miri, welcome.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Okay. I want to do a couple things with you. I want to talk a little bit about sort of your thoughts around the October 7th and 8th anniversaries of pretty significant events of Israel. And then I want to talk about mainly focus on the war in the North, because I know you've been involved and talked a lot about that. So we just went through a couple significant days. October 7th, the war in Gaza. October 7th, when it expanded with Hezbollah entering the fray. And of course, others have entered since then. Just any thoughts about the last couple of days and the memories that it provoked in you?
One of the biggest challenges that I have as an Israeli in this year to the war is that I do a lot of work with international media, with international influencers worldwide. And everybody's talking to me about October 7th as a Memorial Day. And John, we've never had the opportunity to mourn. Not only have we not had the opportunity to mourn what happened on October 7th, and those were killed on October 7th, it's not that we're reliving the day every day. It is still with us. The war that Hamas started on October 7th, the genocidal barbaric attack in taking 250 people and still holding 101 Israelis hostage, it's not an open scar. It's an ongoing war. Not only that, but from October 7th or 8th, Hezbollah joined in. We've been in a multi-front war ever since. So October 7th is like, I want to mourn for what happened that day, because a lot of challenges on that day, but I'm not yet there because I have been actively fighting in a war ever since October 7th in 2023, and we're already a year later in 2024.
So I appreciate that. It's and for those of us who love and support Israel here in the United States, particularly people who follow what I do, it's been a difficult year. I was mentioning to someone yesterday, my social media feed is a sewer of anti-Israel, anti-Jew hatred. It is absolutely shocking. And even people, I lean to the right politically, but the right in the United States, it's shocking. Every day there's somebody else who's falling for it. And it's a propaganda war like I've never seen.
So I'm going to step in and say two things.
Sure.
One is that it's been an information propaganda war from day one, from October 7th. You had both in the United States, but also worldwide. It's not an alternative narrative. It's a genocidal, anti-Semitic slur. I like that you just said sewer. So what's happening for me as an Israeli is not only was I horrifically attacked on October 7th, and I'm still in that war, I was immediately attacked in a multi-war front, and from October 7th, I've been blamed. Not only blamed, but vilified. And that sewer that you're talking about has only gotten murkier, darker, and worse, both in the far right and in the left and far left. Real challenges for us. I feel safer in Israel right now than I would feel anywhere around the world because of the information warfare.
Well, it used to be, you could say that America was a pretty safe place for Jews, but I live in the Columbus, Ohio area, and I see what's going on our campus, Ohio State University, one of the largest universities in the country, and then in places in New York. And so let me just say this. I've been to the Middle East. I've watched the war in Syria. I'm very well aware of all the Palestinian issues. And, there were Hezbollah slaughtered Syrians, but there were no protests about that. And I'm not missing something there, am I?
No, you're not missing anything. I mean, it's on so many different levels. The way that when Israel does it, it's not okay. Anybody else can do it. When Jews do it, they can be sidelined. The only, I don't even know how to call it, religious, cultural, ethnic group in the world that is being told, no, you can't participate in our lives today are the Jews. And it's got a really old name to it. It's called anti-Semitism. It has a lot of new names that go with that, anti-Zionism and anti-Israel. And it's not just that I'm Israeli and I'm a Zionist and I'm a Jew, like I'm the troika, the triple of all three. It's that when you take those together at the end, certainly within social media where it gets horrifically amplified, that's been what's new in the last year because it spreads out and amplifies in social media. The memes themselves, the way that it's described is hardcore, very regular 2,000-year-old anti-Semitism. And that's the horrible part for me. And John, I was actually born in the States and my parents chose to move to Israel. And we moved here over 50 years ago. We moved here in the early 1970s. I've lived here my entire life. My parents did not move from the States because of anti-Semitism. They moved out of the positive, out of Zionism. They love the state of Israel. We love the state of Israel. We're all here. I don't think my parents would be able to fathom what has happened in the United States in 2023, 2024, when it comes to in the high holidays of 2024. If you're Jewish, you have to have police escort. You have police who won't escort you. Where have we arrived at? Very shocking.
I think of my my mother's family came from Pittsburgh, and my grandfather's buried right around just down the street from where I think it was the Tree of Life synagogue attack occurred, and it's unbelievable. And I pick up my phone this morning. I was talking with my friend Danny Seaman just a little while ago. And as we're talking, there's a terror attack in Hadara. There's hundreds of rockets raining down on Haifa, and my red alert app goes off all the time. I had to turn the notifications off, but it runs down the battery on my phone because it just never stops.
But you're with us, and I appreciate that because most people do not understand the subtext of us being at war for a year. Because at the end of the day, every single day, waking moments and sleeping moments, am in dread of the siren, and then the siren happens, and then I'm grateful and thankful for the air defense system that protects us. And every single time there's an attack, I wait to see, is the air defense system infallible? Because at the end, we're amazing. We intercept 90, 95%, but that means that we're not intercepting 5 to 10%. And then you get both the injured, let alone the killed, and all over Israel. And those incoming rockets come from Hezbollah. Let's put it in the 1 year statistics, okay? Hamas fired into Israel over 15,000 rockets from October 7th. Hezbollah has fired into Israel from October 8th, 2023, over 14,000 rockets. That's Hezbollah. That everybody thinks that the war started a month ago. No, they have fired before this whole stage over 12,000 rockets. The Houthis in Yemen have fired into Israel hundreds of projectiles. I haven't even gotten to Iran. The Hezbollah in Iraq, those are Iraqi, Arabic-speaking Shiites. They're not the same Hezbollah as the ones in Lebanon, have fired into Israel projectiles, suicide drones, including killing 2 soldiers and injuring 24 more last week up in the Golan. So when we talk about that, I as a person, wherever you go, there's the sirens, there's the protection, but that's how we live now. I think the best thing that we can do is to live our lives, not to succumb to the terror, but it is very challenging and you have to have a lot of resilience.
So I want to talk now. We could go on a very, very long time about this and the solution. And, I've watched this since I was 13 when the 6-Day War happened in 1967. And my father, who was a pastor here in Ohio at the time, big supporter of Israel, had always talked about Israel, loved Israel, and he talked about the 6-Day War for a very long time. It was he had been involved in the invasion into Europe and as an infantryman in World War II.
Wow.
So he understood war, and he never, by the way, he never ever talked about that experience. He would never. Mom always said, "Don't even ask him; he won't talk about it." And so I know these events have very long last. It affected my father for the rest of his life. What happened a year ago will affect you and a lot of us for the rest of our lives. And what's ongoing is affecting us now. I personally can't get away from it. I'm retired now, so I have more time. But so let's talk about the North, because you've really done fantastic work on the North. And I think there was an assessment, and I don't know if you were involved with it or it came from your institution, about what it, and I just read it overnight for the first time, but I've listened to your interview, so I think I understand what's in it. Tell us about what the thinking was among the security community of which you're a part there in Israel about what's going to happen in the North, and then relate that to what's actually happening and what's happening right now and how that all interrelates.
So the International Institute for Counterterrorism, based at Reichman University, I'm a senior fellow. I was the director for a time period as well. Did what you would call a research paper in counterterrorism. What does that mean? It said, we're going to look at the threat, in this case, what they called the northern threat. And we're going to try and talk about what that threat, the capabilities that Hezbollah and all of the different northern Axis allies, I mean, that's like a contradiction, Axis participants, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, the Hezbollah that's in Syria, other Shiite groups in Syria, Bashar al-Assad, keep on going, how they would try to both attack Israel, what kind of impact that would make here. And the idea was not to just present this terrorism and what they did, but in the counterterrorism, okay, so if they're planning to do all of that, what do we need to do both in active defense, and I say that's preemptive, and in passive defense, and that's like having safe capabilities that you build up front so that when that attack happens, you can handle it. I just talked about that in general. And what Israel has done in the last 4 weeks, to a large degree, is the intelligence combined with operational aspect of how you actively preempt against a terror threat, because that terror threat could have done horrific damage to Israel if it had enacted the plan that it had. In the years before October 7th, I, as an analyst up north on the northern border, would stand on the northern border, a place that you've been to, would look into the different areas that right now Israeli soldiers are a kilometer, that's less than a mile from the border itself. But I would look at these very close places. You'd stand there, and it's also topographically, you'd be looking up. And I would talk about that Hezbollah threat that we are now preemptively trying to destroy. That threat included things that they did very minutely from October 8th, meaning Hezbollah from October 8th used their projectiles, which are ATGMs with a direct line, ground-to-ground rockets, missiles, mortars, different types of UAVs and suicide drones. And Hezbollah has used them every single day from October 8th. They immediately joined in, and they targeted all of the communities that live inside Israel. You've been to many of them, and targeting them. And because of that, Israel said on October 8th, over a year ago, that those communities need to leave, not because of the projectiles, not because of the missiles, not because of the suicide drones. They need to leave because of the ground, I don't want to call it infantry, terror army plan, which for years I had stood on the border and talked about, the Radwan Hezbollah forces, where they practiced and they showed, and there's so much material online to see how they presented themselves where I'm going to describe this, and in your eyes, you're going to see the horrific footage from October 7th that Hamas did. But this is what Hezbollah was planning as well, to come in on motorcycles, to come in on Jeeps, to come in on pickup trucks, to come in with paragliders, to come from underground, subterranean arena, to come by sea, to simultaneously do a multi-pronged attack at dozens of different communities. I've described this from 2019, 2020, 2021. Hassan Nasrallah speaks about it, presents it, and he talked about it with maps, and he called it Operation Liberation of Galilee. He had a name for it. And I give all of that in the background because all of this is something that was known. And if you did not preempt against it, what Israel has been doing for the last 4 weeks, what we would have gotten is something 10 times worse than what Hamas already did on October 7th. And so what the Institute itself presented was also a lot of, if they could have used the full capabilities that they have of all of the different projectiles and platforms to fire into Israel. And the worst part is an October 7 multi-prong attack where they do projectiles together with that kind of ground attack. And they called it Operation Liberation for Galilee. They wanted to conquer, hold the area, or alternatively, take hostages. And here we are. We're a year later, and you can see the difference of the Israeli defense system that was preparing for that northern threat and the way that it is preempting now against those capabilities, compared very sadly. It's not just tragic and harsh, it's a colossal failure, and it needs to be called such, both of myself and everybody around, that none of us were calling this out as something that Hamas would do. And if you don't prepare yourself, then it takes you time both to react, to understand, to prepare, and they have still 101 hostages. So right now, that's what we're doing in our actions against Hezbollah and the Radwan forces throughout Lebanon, both at the front line so that they can't do that ground attack, but further in the endless arsenals of weapons that they prepared with the vehicles, with the capabilities to come in, assault Israel, do the horrific type of genocidal attack that we saw on October 7th, and most likely take hostages back into Lebanon.
So, the last, as someone who follows it pretty closely. So, for example, I sit here with my computer and Google Translate, and I'm reading, as painful as it is, Nasrallah's speeches. I mean, I read. They always tell you what they're going to do.
They do.
And it was kind of interesting. I mean, some of my Orthodox Jewish friends have said that what we've seen in the last 4 weeks has been one of these Purim reversals, where Haman was hung on the gallows the story of Esther, Haman was hung on the gallows that he prepared for Mordecai. And it has been an absolute, in a and I'm trying to think of, I don't think like a Hezbollah person, but I'm looking at the psychological, technological, military intelligence operation that's taken place in the last month. And it's incomparable to anything that's happened in human history. I think that's a pretty fair assessment.
I can agree. And I'm not going back. I think that what we've done is unexpected. It is new. It is different. It's something that when you look at it, you go, wow, how do you take care of a terror army? I remind all of us, Hezbollah is not the Lebanese army. There is a thing called the Lebanese army. Hezbollah are Lebanese. They're Shiites. They are, the structure of Lebanon is so complex. But I say that because what do you do when you're not fighting against a standard army? It's a terror army. And I think that Israel's preparations, the intelligence infiltration, the capabilities to bring such exact targets, to go after the cache of weapons, the arsenals, the communication and control, the headquarters, and the people, the terrorists themselves, in all the different levels, because it's from Hassan Nasrallah down to the lowliest terrorist. That's amazing. It is exceptional. And I breathe in deep and say, we've degraded them horrifically. But I want to be clear. Not only do I read Hassan Nasrallah's speeches and follow. As we have to be a little cynical about it. We're like, so who's going to give the speeches now? And we've kind of wiped them out one after the other. There will be somebody there, John. The challenge for me is that deep ideology that doesn't delegitimize Israel. It accepts that Israel is totally illegitimate. It's not it dehumanizes the Israelis and the Jews, because it's both of them. That ideology has caught on way beyond Hezbollah, so that our military prowess against their capabilities, which is absolutely amazing, has not in any way, I say this very sadly, stopped the rhetoric, the words of those that for the last 32 years, he was the Secretary General of Hezbollah for 32 years. He was an orator, okay? Now, being an orator for he's a terror orator. And his story of what Hezbollah is and what they're doing has caught on with people that makes me very, very sad. There are Christians in Lebanon, not all of them. There are a lot of different types of Christians, Lebanese Arabic Christians, but there are Lebanese Arabic Christians in Lebanon who view what Hassan Nasrallah said as being okay. That to me is the aspect where we do the poorest. We're amazing at going against their military capabilities, and we don't yet know how to handle that ideology that has crept into the Western world. I was just, reading before of what's happening in mainstream US media of, is it okay to question Israel's right to exist? A question that you would not get anywhere else in the world. And to me, it's about Hezbollah, meaning, look at us. We're so effective. Look at us, how despite our military effectiveness, that's turned against us as being shown. Israel is the aggressor, which bites into all of the different negative aspects that Hassan Nasrallah said every single week or twice a week in his weekly sermon. And he said it in very eloquent Arabic. That doesn't make it nice and good. It was a terrorist who's very eloquent. That still is going to leave with us, sadly, an aspect that I don't think that we in Israel, together with our friends worldwide, yet know how to deal with.
So I guess my question for you is, so in this assessment that was prepared about the war in the North, and I've heard interviews where you said that if this war in the North cut loose, there could be 200 dead Israelis every day for a long time, for weeks maybe.
Yeah.
And now that, praise the Lord, that has not come true thus far.
Because we preempted, because of what we've done in the last 3 weeks. That's the only reason.
But what I also hear you say, and what I'd like you to maybe address for us here is, in America, we would call it spiking the football. Like you spike the football because you've crossed the goal line. Although every now and then there's a guy, an idiot, that will spike the football before he gets to the goal line, and he's on the highlight reels of the dumbest guy of the year. But so my question is, there's a lot of pride, euphoria about what's happened over the last 4 weeks. And I think Danny Hagari, the spokesperson, came out and said there had been, I think the number was 700 raids over the last year by special forces into Lebanon. We've never heard about. And the videos and the
special forces,
the weapons and all of this stuff. And I'm sure that part of it's being revealed because we've taken out the top leadership. We took out the leaders of the Al Radwan Brigade. But what's the concern about? What does everybody need to continue to be concerned about? Because you're right, it's not over, because it's ultimately an ideological, religious battle that's going on.
So I'm going to talk about the ideological, religious one in a moment. For a moment, I just want to be a military person. And as a military person, I want to talk numbers. We did an amazing event. We took out, I don't know this, okay? I'm saying that based on numbers, there are Israeli analysts who say we've hurt 50% of the Hezbollah capabilities, John, that is unheard of to do such a thing in such a short time. And really, in that sense, with our own air defense and the way that we've done that with minimal casualties, it's a war, there are casualties, that's always a hard problem. But I need to do the statistics because Hezbollah, before this started, every estimate was talking about 150,000 rockets. I'm not talking about the other types of air platforms, UAVs, suicide drones, 150,000 rockets. Let's say that we've taken out 50%. Wow, 75,000 rockets. John, that means that 75,000 still remain. That is 3 times the amount that Hamas started their war on October 7th. If we've taken out the long range, as I say, it's about percentages. And what I'm still worried about is swarms of drones. They've tried to launch, I know that that's what those aerial attacks that we've been doing all over the place, where we give early warning, we tell people to leave. Why do we tell them to leave? Because you and I would not host inside our living room or children's room projectiles, RPGs, cruise missile in the living room, UAVs, and the different sites where they can fire them from. And so that's where all of these different types of weapons are there or underground. And so you do a variety of different aerial attacks to try to destroy the weapons on the ground. But I'm still worried about that, because that kind of a swarm, even though it will not destroy the state of Israel, our preemptive action stopped the October 7 kind of attack. That's existential. But it does not stop the aerial projectile capabilities that can still have serious damage. It would not annihilate us. But I think that after a year, again, we've been fighting for a year. 101 hostages have not yet come back. And if they have a serious capability that they use and we can't stop, if we can't deny it, you're going to see that our euphoria will go down quickly. And we need to be aware they still have half the capabilities they had before, but that's still a lot of capabilities.
Well, and I made reference to, there was a poster in Palestinian Square in Tehran a few months, well, probably back in February, with the pictures
they
of.
Put up a new one now.
Oh, have they?
Yeah. They use Tehran Square. It's a fascinating thing to follow. You who follow these fascinating things. Tehran Square, or it's more correctly, it's Palestine Square in Tehran. They literally changed the posters there. They're humongous murals. Think of it as like being Times Square and that somebody puts up something really, really big. And most of the time they put up things in Persian and Hebrew. Why do they put it up in Hebrew? At the heart
They're sending a message. Yeah.
They want us to read it. That's part of what I call the information warfare, that psychological warfare that they're trying very hard both to bluster and to show, but it's not just bluster. They have supplied Hezbollah with endless weapons for the last 15 years, even longer, but pretty much without anybody stopping them.
And is the supply chain continuing?
So that's one of the things that Israel, again, in that preemptive way, you can stop it oh so much. But here I'm going to say to all of us, okay, to our audience, to who we all are, why is Israel in this alone? Really? Hezbollah is Israel's problem? They just call for our annihilation. Okay, here I'll solve the problem and self-annihilate. I'm just saying, okay, like to stop with Hezbollah is to say I'm going to agree or acquiesce with the fact that they're calling for my annihilation. So I go, but who supplies them with the ideology? Who inspires them? Who gives them the weapons? All of this is coming from the Islamic regime of Iran via the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, which are defined as, they are designated as a terror organization, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, but that's not enough. It's as if now that Iran, that has already specifically targeted us twice directly, the weaponry that they're using, that's all within the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. That's not the Iranian military, it's the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. And I go, well, why are we in this alone? Those supply routes, why is Israel the one attacking those? Because they're getting to Hezbollah. The Islamic regime of Iran is the destabilizer, ideological core for that one proxy, non-proxy. Hezbollah is very complicated. It's both a proxy and not a proxy. But also for, like everybody kind of thinks it's funny that there's these Houthis in Yemen who fire cruise missiles and drones and into Israel. Why is that funny? Why is this Israel's problem? Why are the Houthis of Iran, supplied by the Islamic regime of Iran, firing projectiles into Israel? And so to me, as I look at the supply lines, I'd like to see the world take care of the Houthis, because the Houthis are disrupting the the shipping passages of the world. I'd like to see the world take care of the Islamic regime of Iran. And take note, I'm not saying the United States. And here we get into the nitty-gritty of all of the challenges around us, because at the end, what's happened in this war, and that's probably the worst thing for us as Israel, beyond the horrific anti-Semitism that I said, and when I'm talking about outside, has been the strengthening of a budding alliance that was always a bad idea. And that budding alliance is the one where Iran supplies Russia with weapons. Iran supplies China with oil. And suddenly you have Russia, China, and Iran on the same page. That disturbs me a lot. And these are things that Israel does not take. That's not at our level. That's at the world level.
Well, you've described a world war.
Well, everybody wants to contain it and make sure it's only about Israel. And John, that actually for me as an Israeli is part of the horrible aspect. As long as everybody's fighting just against Israel, that's okay. Are you kidding me? So I said, right, then why don't you just say Israel should be annihilated and all of your world problems will go away? So I'll surprise you. We're here to stay.
I'm with you 100%. So I know we're sort of getting close to the time that you need to go out, but if you could just, so you had this massive ballistic missile attack from Iran last week, and there's a response coming. I'm confident of that. But there's a psychology thing going on here. And you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but what should Israel do in response to that? Because they can't let it go. I mean, you have to be the strong horse in the area, and we can finish up with this, but what do you think needs to be done in the near term on this?
So here I look at it both it's not an immediate issue, meaning Iran, the Islamic regime of Iran, stood up and said, okay, we did what we had to do. Now, no backsies, we're done. So that's what we call, I don't go with the Islamic regime of Iran. What can Israel do? There are three different options. One is not to do anything military, physical, which for most Israelis is not an option, not because of revenge, but because of deterrence, which means that you need to act, but there are two vastly different ways that you can act, and each one can be big or small, but one is overt. You go, like you did to Yemen a few weeks ago, you openly bomb during the day a port, oil facilities, a building of the Islamic regime, something of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. You do that overtly. You have to take into account then what that does throughout the area, because Iran will respond to something overt. Iran will probably respond both against Israel, but also against anybody that Israel flew through, because to get there, what does the United States do? The United States has lots of forces deployed all over the area there. I'm saying when you do something overt, you have to take into account overt has a different kind of response. You can also do something that I call covert. So allegedly, Israel killed Ismail Haniyeh at the heart of Tehran. But allegedly Israel did it. That's a covert action. Nobody showed me any Israelis. I don't know that they did it. I know that I woke up in the morning and Ismail Haniyeh was dead in Tehran, and he and his bodyguard, and that's it. So you can do actions that are covert, that everybody may think it's Israel, but who says it's Israel? Israel allegedly did something that has to do with beepers and walkie-talkies and pagers. Israel never claimed it. So that one was a lot bigger, and it's harder to say that it wasn't Israel, but we never claimed it. And I give that for all of us right now, because what you attack overtly, you're going to get a response. What you do covertly, because you can go against nuclear sites, you can go against Iranian Revolutionary Guard sites, you can do a lot of things where the Iranians know, and you know, and maybe everybody knows, but it isn't that open back and forth. And I say that because you mentioned before, this is a world war. We don't want war. We've never wanted war. We are in the Middle East. And so part of what we need to achieve is a level of deterrence that we absolutely lacked on October 7th, because if we had deterrence, Hamas would not have done what they did. If we had deterrence, Hezbollah would not have joined in when they did. If we had deterrence, Yemen would not fire at us. And if we had deterrence, Iran would not fire at us. So as I say, you have to look at it in a broad sense. I want us to be smart, not revengeful. And I think that we have very good people in the security establishment, in our decision makers, who are really thinking about this right now.
So you got to go. So I'm concerned about, I've talked to the people of Alma Research and other places. And this morning there was on the news, there's a tunnel that was just uncovered. I don't know if it was up around Kiryat Shimona or someplace.
The one that was uncovered was near Zarit, if you remember, Zarit,
okay.
A bit nearer to Naria.
Okay. But that's an ongoing, how many more of those are there that nobody knows about? And they've been building those tunnels for 40 years, right?
So
how much more extensive are they than the ones in Gaza that are a problem?
I don't know to give you a full answer. I do know that after the failure of October, two things about October 7th in that sense, very, very harshly cynical. We in Israel were so effective against the Hamas attack tunnels that none of the terrorists, the thousands of terrorists that came into Israel on October 7th, came via a tunnel, even though there's a vast tunnel system under the Gaza Strip, meaning we understood and we managed to sever the line that comes into Israel. Mm-hmm. So they came in by paragliders and they came in by pickup trucks and by motorcycles and knocking down the wall. When you go up north, it's a different type of terrain and topography, but you have to learn from your other mistakes, meaning go on the assumption that there are tunnels, go and look for them. My biggest challenge for all of us right now is that in our infantry special force action that we're doing right now to destroy the cache of weapons and the terrorists themselves that wanted to come into Israel to do a ground attack, the biggest challenge is in kidnapping, is that they would take a single soldier hostage, and that they do via tunnels. So what you need to do is in your operational capabilities, certainly at the tactical level, you have to deny them that opportunity. And that means that you work slow, systematic, and careful. And that's what we're going to be doing against the Hezbollah capabilities along the border, where we said very clearly that we're going in for a kilometer or two. That's like a mile and a half. And it's exactly, John, to be able to address any kind of attack tunnels that would be coming into Israel, but also to try to destroy tunnel capabilities that absolutely exist underneath the different Shiite villages in southern Lebanon. We've gone into some of them. We haven't gone into other ones. I think that it'll be slow, systematic, very close to the border to deny that capability. That's called preempting.
Well, I wish we had about 14 hours to begin to scratch the surface.
We're just going to have to talk again.
We'll have to do it again. Miri, thanks so much. If people want to follow you, what's the best way to do that?
I have a newly published website, mirieisen.com. I'm in all of the different social media. I don't post a lot of things. What I post is all of my different media presentations, the different briefings that I give, webinars, etc., so that people can just sit and listen to what I talk about.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time today. And I'm going to end the stream and I'll say goodbye to you on the other side. So thank you again.
Thank you so much.